Hey there, Professor Fields here. Administration of Justice 100, Introduction to AJ. We are into Chapter 9, which is the criminal trial. In this portion, we're going to talk about the jury instructions. The other segments talked earlier about the sequence of the trial. This is at the very end of the trial, the verdict. So once the jury has heard all the evidence and the defense rests their case and the closing arguments are done, then they go to the jury instructions. And what happens is the judge instructs the jury on the law they must follow. And in California, we use CalCrim jury instructions. For this class, you don't really need to know what they're about, just that they exist. What they are is a set of instructions that tells the jury exactly how they can consider the evidence when coming to their conclusions. Now, if you take a criminal law class, AJ 103, AJ 131, which is criminal evidence, and criminal procedures, you're going to talk about jury instructions. You'll get to know them pretty good. I encourage my officers that used to work for me to look at the jury instructions, because those are what the jury are going to hear when your case goes to trial. Now the judge will instruct the jury in a criminal trial that they must find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is, a reasonable person would have no reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty as charged. Now, we've talked about the reasonable person several times during this course when it comes to probable cause and other things like that. There's also a video in this segment about what beyond a reasonable doubt means. And here's a little chart saying, showing you, where that level of proof is. Preponderance of evidence, that's in a civil trial, where just a little bit more. I always equate it to two buckets of sand, and you take a pinch out of one bucket and drop it in the other one. Now it weighs a little bit more. That's the preponderance of evidence. So you see that it's a much higher reasonable doubt standard. Once the instructions are read, the jury is taken away to a deliberation room where they deliberate. And that means they go over the evidence, they talk among each other, they take a vote saying, hey, what are we going to find? And I'll talk about the verdicts in a minute here. This is a picture from a movie called 12 Angry Men. If you've never seen it, see it. It's an old movie from the 40s, I believe, or 50s. But it's a great movie. Now, they may reach several outcomes. Guilty means the defendant committed the crime, and in California and in federal, you must be unanimous. In other words, there's 12 jurors in a criminal trial. All 12 must say this person did it beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not the case in other states, but it is in California. Acquittal means not guilty, which means that the prosecution did not prove their case. Didn't mean the person didn't do it, but just means that the prosecution did not prove their case. And again, this must be unanimous. In other words, all 12 must say not guilty. Now, if they all say not guilty and is acquitted, then they cannot be charged for the same crime again, even if, here's this book that O.J. Simpson wrote, If I Did It, even if new evidence comes to light that says this person did it. This is called double jeopardy. It's prohibited by the Fifth Amendment. Now, they can be tried on separate charges, so if there's a lesser included, like maybe it's a murder robbery and they didn't charge the robbery to start with, they can go back and charge the robbery if they can get a conviction on that. They can charge federal crimes. A good example of that was, you remember the Rodney King incident, where Rodney King was beat by the LAPD officers. They tried him in state court. They were found not guilty. They tried him in federal court on basically the same charges, except that it's a civil rights version of it. And they were found guilty. Some of them were found guilty. A hung jury. A hung jury is one that they failed to reach an agreement. They couldn't come up with a guilty, or they couldn't come up with a not guilty. And at that point, the judge would normally declare a mistrial. A lot of times they'll do the Allen charge, which the judge will send the case back to the jury saying, hey, why don't you keep trying at it, keep going at it, maybe you can come to a decision. Now, if a mistrial is declared, or it's a hung jury, the state can retry the charges again, unless the judge dismisses charges with prejudice, which means that they can't recharge the person. But if there's no dismissal with prejudice, then the state can always come back and retry.